Hello, I hope this finds you well today. And thank you for checking in on this program about power. And today I'm going to be talking about power and the role it plays in your student organization and between you, your members, your community, and where we find it, what its sources are, and how it can affect things in a positive or negative way, particularly in regards to student organizations. The focus for today's presentation is going to be based off of the research and work of French and Raven and their power taxonomy. And that's a scientific way of looking at classifications or how we create order within some things. So with that, we'll be looking at their sources of power, and they have 6 in their taxonomy, and those implications for you and your student organization. So some questions to think about as you first start to think about power. What is it? Where does it come from? What role does it play in your student organization? So as you're viewing this with your organization, this might be a time or in a moment when you want to pause the video and have a discussion about these questions. What is power? Is it the ability to get something done? Does it come from a person? Does it come from a title? And those are different sources that we're going to talk about in a little bit. What role does it play? Does it help get things done? Does it create conflict? Is it a positive? Is it a negative? Could it be both? So some things to think about that way. Where is it? How is it used? Is it a noun or a verb? It can actually be used as both. So some things to think about is, what is this power? Where is it coming from? And what role is it going to play in your student organization? Now that leads me to French and Raven's 6 sources of power. And they've looked at positional sources and they looked at personal sources. Now for the positional sources, they determined that they fall into 4 areas in their taxonomy. And that's legitimate, reward, coercive, and information. So those are the 4 positional sources of power. They also determine that there's 2 personal sources of power, and that is expert and referent. And those we're going to look at too in regards to, is it the position? Is it the person? Is it a combination? How does power affect what you're doing with your student organization? Now, the first in the positional listing is legitimate power. When we think of legitimate power, the source of someone's power comes from their role or title. So that may be something they were hired for. That may be something they were elected to. That may be something that you're meeting with them because they have that title. Group members believe that that person ought to have power because of the position or the responsibilities tied to that position. However, this power can be fleeting in how it influences people because it's based on the authority of your position and maybe not because of you. So for an example of that, I used to be part of a board, and then through my involvement with that board, I became an executive officer, and then I became the president of that board. So being president of that board gave me some legitimate power. I had the title, I had the formal role of being president, and I had once served on that board. Because of that, because of the responsibilities of being president, people saw that I was legitimate in certain powers and things that I could do in that role and the influence and authority that it had. However, that power is tied to the role. So therefore, when I left being the president of that organization and moved on to be past president, and then just a member of the board prior to leaving the board, that power stayed with the role. So the legitimate power can be tied to a role. So therefore, you could say that that legitimate power is in the governor's office, or it's in the treasurer's office. However, it may not be with the governor, the treasurer, or the president of the board, as was the case with me. However, it might be, as we look at personal sources of power in a little bit. So one thing to think about are those legitimate powers. And those are probably tied to organizations, officers, and those roles or responsibilities hopefully are reflected in your constitution. Then there's reward power. This could be a fun one. However, it's not foolproof, and there have been some studies on what people will react to and be influenced by in regards to rewards. So someone with reward power has the ability to deliver positive consequences, possibly remove a negative one. They influence behavior by the delivery of positive outcomes, desired resources. So this could be material. So in theory, this could be, hey, whoever sells the most this quarter is going to get that trip to Hawaii. Or it could be intrinsic in nature. This might be where you develop that you have the member of the month for your student organization. And that's something that you could create and honor the person who's given the most that month. The challenge with reward power is that this power is lost if someone doesn't value the reward. So with that, if someone tries to yield reward power, but people aren't influenced by the reward, then it's probably not going to work. So as a parent, there was a point in time where maybe I could say to my son, hey, how about you finish your dinner? Or how about you do this? Or how about you do that? And there's a quarter in it for you. And as a small child, it'd be like, wow, that's a quarter. It's a big deal. I'll go put it in my piggy bank. Now, that wouldn't have much of an effect on my teenage son that way. So one of the things to think about is why you reward. What is the purpose of the reward? It may have a monetary or material value, but it doesn't have to. And sometimes those thank yous or those acknowledgements actually can be a greater reward than the trinket or the other item or even the certificate. But that's not to say that a certificate can't be a powerful reward too. Looking at a member of the month, looking at a program of the semester, looking at different things you can do within your organization to use reward power in a positive way. Now, looking at that coin that I might have given to my son when he was young as a reward, every coin has two sides. And the opposite side of reward power would be coercive power. And in coercive power, this is where someone can deliver negative consequences, or they're going to take away something positive, something that you desire. Often this is punitive and threatening. Not only can this damage the relationship between you and the person yielding coercive power, it also can really have a damaging effect throughout the organization. So from members to committee chairs to officers, this is one that really can have some negative ripple effects. Often someone who will do or use coercive power is someone who lacks confidence or someone who's a bully. And in some cases, that may be the same thing, where you have a bully who lacks confidence that way. Now, that's not to say that people shouldn't be held accountable. If someone has a role, they need to meet the duties of those roles, or they may be removed from that. So impeaching an officer could be a positive way of looking at coercive power. You were elected to this role. You are supposed to meet these attendance requirements. You're supposed to fulfill these duties of your role. If you do not do that, the organization hopefully can give you a chance to improve. And then if that doesn't happen, offer you the opportunity to step away or resign. And if you fail to do that and to make those improvements and to meet your role, impeach and remove you. So that would be an appropriate use of coercive power. So it's not always bad. But unlike, say, hey, whoever sells the most this quarter gets the free trip to Hawaii and the reward power there, coercive power would be whoever sells the least this quarter, you're out of work. And we're going to hire someone new for that role. So it's that threat, it's that scare. And that's going to damage relationships as people try and outsell versus bringing people together. And that's a challenge of the reward coercive powers. Now, another positional source of power is information. And this is one that was a newer add. So originally, French and Raven had 5 sources of power, and the ones that we've already covered, and then the personal ones, which we're going to get to. Information power was added later on. And that's because some of the research really goes back even before the influence of big data and communication and cell phones and processing things that we do now. And as many of you know, data now doubles so much faster in a year now than it did for a millennium, not that long ago. So information power. Group members believe the person has useful knowledge not available elsewhere. So that's that information. You have knowledge that way, or the ability to seek it. One has access to information, source data, along with being highly skilled in written or verbal communication. So that's one way of saying you've got information others may not be able to easily access, and you're pretty good at how you share it. So this is where charisma might play a role too. So I may have some information that the rest of the group may not have, and I might have a charismatic approach of how I could present that information, which might be very different than if it were just in a memo or in a very monotone tone in how it was shared that way. So part of that can be affected by the person in that role with the information. Also, a challenge is the ability to share withhold information, along with potentially manipulating that information to affect outcomes or influence of others. In today's society, that would be fake news. So people creating fake news, people creating statistics that only work to their benefits, and that they create a study that definitely derives the outcome that they knew it would, which is really not something that could be generalized or move forward. This is someone who could create stats in regards to, well, you know what, we're going to put this survey out there, and the first 10 of the 100 that were returned really gave us a report that we liked. 8 of those 10 agreed with the outcome we were hoping to get, even though maybe only a third of the respondents did. But here, and we could say, of these 10, or we could say 80% of those who initially responded to our survey saw this as this, which really, it's not 80%. It's maybe closer to 30%, but it's a way that you can manipulate that information. This also, though, can be done in a very positive way, to see things that are being missed, to be like, hey, you know, this is going great with this program, but someone mentioned we could add this to it too, because we took a survey and we asked them at the end in the evaluation, hey, what do you think about this? Or what could be added, or where could it share? And then that person could have some information power and how it plays into affecting you. So this is something that doesn't necessarily reside with the person with a great title. It might, if you have someone who's working in social media or checking stats or doing things like that for your organization. But this is something where really any member could potentially have information and use that information in a positive way to share knowledge and to empower people in your organization, or could use it to manipulate information into something like fake news or stats that tell the story that you want to tell versus the real story. So something to think about that way. I know one thing I've always enjoyed with an analogy that way is someone shooting a bow and arrow, and someone saying, yeah, that's a bullseye. You did really good where you hit the paper there. But the question is, was the bullseye there and then the arrow was shot at it? Or was the arrow shot at the paper and then the bullseye was painted in the appropriate place? Because those are two very different stories. So being mindful of information and using it appropriately. So now we're taking a shift. We looked at positional sources of power: legitimate, reward, coercive, and information. Then French and Raven looked at 2 personal sources of power. One of those personal sources of power was expert. In expert power, group members believe the person has special knowledge or skill and is trustworthy. That's key, the trustworthy, along with the knowledge. Skills and competencies based on education, training, extended experience. So this isn't just a hunch. This isn't just an opinion. This person's either worked at a craft for a very long time. This person has spent years developing a competency in performance or skill or recognition of something. This person has training. Being undergraduate students like yourself, you're receiving training in and out of the classroom. Maybe they have a master's degree or a PhD. So there's experience there. An expert power enables or assists others through the mastery of these skills and the acquisition of knowledge, which is one of the key things that we try and do in a learning environment like SUNY Oswego. And this person is trusted for what they know, and people are going to ask others in the organization for their help with something. So organizationally speaking, where this is a big deal, this expert might be your organization's advisor. Maybe you've had an advisor who's been with the group for 10 years, maybe longer. And maybe your organization is academic based or social justice based or an interest in faith or sport or what have you. And this person has many, many years of experience even before they became your advisor. So therefore, there's a certain level of expertise there that they can help you with. Or maybe you're in the geology club and your advisor is one of your professors and they have a PhD and many accomplishments in research in geology. So therefore, they bring some expert knowledge there. And because they're an organization advisor, you trust with them and you know that they want to help your growth and development as a student and a geologist that way. So there are some experts that way. This also can play out in individual fields. If, for example, someone had a pain in their elbow and they weren't really sure what it was doing or how it was playing out, you know, someone in a conversation in the MCC might be like, oh, Mike, I have a pain in my elbow. I'm not sure if it was this or that. Maybe I had a pain in my elbow once and I could give some guidance. But the reality is I would not have expert power in regards to having a pain in one's elbow, but that person could go to a doctor or an orthopedic or a specialist, or maybe one of our trainers in Laker Hall, who would then be able to work with them, and they have this expert power to assist that way. So this could be that doctor, this could be the financial advisor. So in a student organization, this might mean that you're making sure that the person who's the treasurer of your organization actually has some expertise at dollars and cents and budgeting. So maybe it's a business student. Doesn't have to be. Maybe it's someone who's really good at math. Maybe it's someone who's very good at balancing things, looking at the intake and outtake, what's encumbered, what's been spent, where's it going. So that could be something that way. Maybe it's that grad student who was here as an undergrad and now they're a grad student here at Oswego. And they can say, you know, when we did this program 3 years ago, here's some of the challenges we faced and how we got over it. Or here, when this happened this way, this is what we did as a workaround. And it actually worked out really, really well. In their experience, what they learned over that time, what they learned from being engaged, made them an expert that way, so that you can look to them as a resource for knowledge and experience that you can apply that way. So an expert is someone who's approachable, someone who's being ethical and trustworthy in that, in helping you and your organization with what they have to offer that way. Now, the sixth source of power is referent power. And this is the one that at times it's hardest to see, yet one that might be easiest to do. And this level of power, group members do what the person wants out of respect, liking, and wanting to be liked. Now, that doesn't mean kiss up. That doesn't mean, so to speak, a grade school term of teacher's pet. Now, that's not what this means. This means because of the way you value that person in your community. Maybe it's a fellow student, maybe it's your advisor, maybe it's the director of your educational program, maybe it's the dean, maybe it's your hall director, that you respect them because you've seen the impact they have and like them and want them to think favorably of you. This is based in strength and trust and in relationships. So it'd be very hard to do this for a stranger. Even though you might have been influenced by that person if they have a regional or say a national stage, but it's really built on the relationship between people and their influence. So that comes from being liked based on the worthiness and right to others' respect. So in that respect, this is something you do because it makes you feel good, but also to help that other person or work with that person because of, you know, of their impact. So this might be the alumni who's coming back to speak to your organization. And you know that that person has created internships. So you're going to help them with a project, not necessarily because you're seeking an internship. Maybe you already got your internships done, but you know that they were a credit to your organization, and you know your experience in your organization has been good for you. So since this person's coming back and looking to do a program and get people involved, you want them to like you and you want their positive influence. But you know, outside of a, hey, great job, or thank you for that, there's not something you're necessarily going to get. So it's not about the reward. There's also no coercive side to this because the person is never going to know if you choose not to get involved. And that's okay too. So this is something where maybe you go home and maybe there's that teacher that had an influence on you in middle school or high school. Maybe there's that community leader who made a difference and kept that park or basketball court or trail open in your community, and that helped you be on the right path and get involved with positive choices as a teenager. And now you see that they're working on a program, or now you're seeing that they need assistance with something. They don't know that you're back. They don't know that you could opt out of being involved. But because of that respect, because of that relationship, you work and help them out. So it might be one of those things where even if you have an advisor who's been there all those years and that person's retired, and you know, gosh, you know, that person helped, we know our alums and our members for years. Let's go rake their lawn. Let's give them an assist that way. Or we know they're doing this fundraiser for this event that's meaningful for them. Let's go participate. Let's go help out with it that way because it's the right thing to do. And we want to help that person. And that person's always given of themselves. So it's very different than the other powers that way. Which brings us back to our sources, as French and Raven had broken them out in their taxonomy, and those that are with position. So if I'm the president of the board, I have some legitimate power that comes with the presidency. If I'm in a position to give a reward, so that might be if you do X amount of community service hours, you get 10% off the cost to the formal at the end of the year. That's something that someone maybe has the power of, or it could be coercive in a positive way. I know we shared that this can be very bad, but it can also be good. An organization may say, we're going to say that you can't participate in this unless we know that your grades are really good, and how that works out. So for some fraternities and sororities, for example, it might be saying, we know academics are important and we know we want our members to achieve well. So if you want to participate in this event, when events are allowed after social distancing, we need to know that you're above a 275. We need to know that someone with a 3.0 might be able to apply for a scholarship and really try and move things forward that way. So there can be that, but you know what? If you got the 2.5 or the 2.4, you can't go to that program, or you can't get that discount, or how this plays out, because we need you to work on your grades and get that up. Then the information, how do you use that? How do you use your stats? How do you use your evals? How do you use your surveys? And that's something even from just using the forms in Like Your Life to do surveys, to how do you poll after a program. There's so much that you can do that way and use information as a positive thing and put people in position to use information that way, but also be mindful that at times that could be used the wrong way. Bringing us back to personal sources, expert, referent, and the impact there and where that plays out and how you involve those people, because those people are in it because they care about you. Those people are helping you because they're ethical, they're empowering, they're inclusive, they know what you're doing, they know the help that you need, they have experience, formal education, years of training and working hard on something, and they're here, they're going to help you out that way. Which leads us to a list of questions. This would be a good time to pause, or in a little bit, pause the video for your student organization and have some good conversations on these questions and where this plays out. Because some of this is thinking forward, some of this is reflective, some of this is for you as the general member or officer of the organization, and some of this is for the whole organization to really think about as a whole. You know, the first one, how have you used sources of power in your life? So think about that. How have you applied or utilized some of those 6 sources of power? Another way of thinking of it, how do you allow others to influence you through the sources of power? How have you been affected by rewards? By something that's coercive? By those with legitimate roles? How do you fact check information? When do you seek an expert? And who do you help because of that referent relationship? Then looking at your organization, what sources of power are found in your organization? Which of the 6 are there? How are they used? Then how can these sources of power be utilized to fulfill the purpose and mission of your organization? So when you look at your constitution, when you look at your values, when you look at that mission statement of, we are group ABC, and this is what we do, how can you use some or all of those 6 sources of power in a positive way to bring that mission to life? Taking that a little step further, your mission's your core, it's what brings people in, but then how can they be applied to your organization to create community? And what defines that community? That might be the members of your organization. That might be a greater community within your academic department. That might be a residence hall. That might be within sport clubs, within the fraternity and sorority community, within the geology department, within a neighborhood. So take some time to discuss and break out and think about that. How do you use these areas of power, sources of power? How do you let them influence you? What role can they play in your organization? And how does that make you bring your purpose to life and help you create a sense of community? Now, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Mike Paestella. I'm the Assistant Director of Campus Life. My office is in the Point. I'm not currently there now, thanks to social distancing, but looking forward to working with you in the MCC and Point in the future when we're all back on campus all the time. However, in the interim, feel free to email me. And if you email me, I can email you back. And in my signature, you'll see that there's a You Can Book Me, and I have some virtual hours. And there are many ways that I can assist you as an individual student who's a member or an officer of an organization and your organization, even from afar, from Zoom or Google Meets or email or other programs, and following up. If you've viewed this video as an individual, or if you used it as an organization program for the Greek standards, for sport clubs, because you can't play right now, for other organizations looking to discuss the topic of power and its influence, reach out to me. I'm happy to do a debrief. I'm happy to do a follow-up. I'm happy to present this live with your organization. Just shoot me an email so we can set that up. Just a couple of quick hits. Some references coming out of dictionary.com, some influence out of Comavies, Exploring Leadership for College Students. Did some research with 6.5 Consulting on this, but really for the most part, it goes back to the beginning with French and Raven and their work on power and their taxonomy. So with that, I thank you for viewing this, and I wish you the best with your organization and all of your activities.